just realized. Sorry about that. Well, let's see here. Let's wait a second. Again, I've been sitting here talking for the past 45 minutes, started the whole episode, and then I realized I didn't press, this hasn't been going on live. Anyway, I'm going to continue this, and I'll upload the full version of this. That's so frustrating. Anyway, just to kind of finish off where I was here, Joseph Boulogne, the subject of today's painting, is... He's this most sought-after individual in the courts of all throughout Europe. He's a lover of many of the most important women at the time. This one dancer, however, who's well connected, Marie-Madeleine Guimard, sees this. She falls in love with Joseph Boulogne. Joseph Boulogne rejects her, so she makes it a point to basically prevent him from getting any further in his career. It's because Joseph Boulogne becomes at this point in line to become the director, the lead composer of the Paris Opera, which again was just like shows the meteoric rise of this individual. For a black man to be the director of the Paris Opera was just like like an incredible achievement, like from literally rags to riches. But because she was so upset with having been rejected by him, she uses her influence to prevent him from from achieving that, and that sort of becomes kind of the beginning of the end for him, because at this same period of time, the French Revolution breaks out, and Joseph Boulogne is, an early, a great supporter of the French Revolution, because one of the big things that you may have heard of the French Revolution is, one of the slogans of the French Revolution, and I'll just forget, is égalité, fraternité, and somebody tell me in the chat there. So equality, brotherhood, and something else. But basically the idea that all men are created equal, right? This is something that was enshrined in the American Constitution after the American Revolution, and the French are, were very supportive of that same attitude, right? And so here you have Joseph Boulogne, who's kind of he's managed to negotiate through the upper echelons of European culture as a black person, and yet, obviously, he still feels like a bit of an outsider. I'm sure for the majority of his life, he's the only person of color in the room, and so that must have been... So when he heard about there's this bubbling up of revolutionary interest, liberté, fraternité, égalité. Thank you so much, Pascaline. Yes, so when there's this bubbling up of the revolution and people are saying, we are going to fight for everyone's freedom, so that it's not just the king running everything, but every single person will be equal when the revolution is said and done. As a black person in France at the time, it's like, yeah, count me in. I'm on board for that. That would be an incredible, yeah, totally. And so he also takes up arms. He becomes the head of his own regiment of people of African descent that are in France. So, which is also another kind of major kind of step forward. And but the tragedy around all of this is that despite the revolution, depending on how you see it as being successful, it doesn't really, that success doesn't really translate for Joseph Boulogne. After the revolution kind of quiets down, many of his wealthy supporters have literally had their heads cut off, and all of the promises that were made to people like who are indigenous, black, Asian, etc., who might have participated in the revolution, supported the revolution. It's kind of like, yeah, I know we said that, but yeah, we're not really gonna totally embrace that, right? So, which I'm sure was very disheartening to him, to having kind of basically given up his career to supporting the revolution, and then that revolution sort of turns its back on him. So after the war, like, so he literally writes here, I continue to show loyalty to the revolution. Since the beginning of the war, I've been serving with relentless enthusiasm, but the persecution I suffered has not diminished. I have no other resources, only to restore my original position. Right? But that's denied, and so he, just like Mather Brown, ultimately dies virtually penniless and in obscurity. And it's not really until decades later that his position, his achievements really are kind of acknowledged and brought back into the foreground. And especially with this movie coming out, Chevalier, in April of 2023, there's, you know, a kind of a renewed interest in him as a composer. So let me see. So here's the. I'm not going to play the trailer and everything here, but this gives you an idea. So it's going to be released April 7th. Let's close all of this. There's their own page there. But it does look like it'll be interesting. I'm curious to see how they describe his story. Joseph Boulogne also wrote very long and lengthy biography. I don't know if it mentions that in here somewhere, but like there's dozens of volumes, or like or like 24 volumes of autobiography. So his own story told from his perspective is out there, but I think it's probably been out of print, and so it'll be interesting to see any new scholarship that comes of it. And lastly, I just want to show a few other images, etchings of this person before we move on to do this painting, because one thing, that will come up here is exactly what did Joseph Boulogne look like. You know, if we look at this portrait here, he looks Caucasian. He doesn't have any features on here which we might identify as someone of African descent. So is this actually what he looked like? Or did the artist, maybe even at Joseph Boulogne's own request, kind of make him look a little bit more palatable to the white audiences? As happened, in the 1940s and 50s with rock music in the United States. You'd have someone like Chuck Berry, who was a black musician, who would be allowed to maybe perform on stage, but afterwards had to go out the back door and wasn't allowed to even sit in the green room. Certainly wouldn't be allowed to go get a drink at the bar, right? So it's interesting to think who this. So this is actually, Gossec was one of the teachers for Joseph Boulogne. Let's see. So here's another painting of him. Again, you be the judge. You tell me, what his actual skin color was. So I think, as we make today's painting, that will be something that we might kind of discuss or think about a little bit. Okay, so let's move on to the next step here. And again, I apologize that all of it's so interesting, because I thought I was commenting on things that you guys were posting in there, and then I'm realizing, oh, it's like, why are people not, I just said that, why are people not, and then I realized, oh, it's because I'm not live here, I'm just talking to myself. So, let's begin here. So what I want to do for my underpainting is just a little bit of details in the face in hand, so that when those get covered up with more paint, I'll be able to see where those details are and I won't feel so lost. So the thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a dark color, like a black. You can use any color, but a darker color is going to be easier to see through other layers of paint, right? So I'm going to take we're going to mix a black right now. So I'm going to take some of my cool blue and my cool yellow. There's probably a bit too much cool yellow in there, but we'll make that adjustment. And some warm red. And just as a review here, basically what we're doing is we've just taken this color, the cool blue and the cool yellow, we mix that to make a green. What's the opposite color of green on the color wheel? Red. So when we add red to this color, we're pulling that color into the neutral core where we get a black, right? So by using the science behind color, we neutralize the saturation of this paint and we get a black. Now, mixing your own black isn't easy to do. It can take a long time to kind of get a hang of it. Suffice to say, though, if you get, for our purpose, like a color like that, which is still a little bit, it's actually, no, that's pretty good. I was going to say it looked a little bit brown there for a moment, and that brown just means you've got a lot of yellow and red, and we need more blue. If it's a little bit greenish, that means we got a lot of this, and we need a little bit more red. If it's a little bit on the purple side, we've got a lot of red and blue, and we need more yellow. So you're just using the opposite color to get the color to get dragged into the neutral core. So that's actually pretty close. Now, if you get to this point and you're like, I just cannot for the life of me tell what this is, take a little bit of white and mix that white here. And that white will tell us very clearly what this color is, because it's hard to tell when you got a big dark pile of paint. Like, what am I actually painting here? So I'm just going to wipe that excess paint off. And let's get a small brush, because we're just going to do some tiny little details. Okay. Let's make sure that's in focus. Okay. So really, I'm mostly concerned with some of these things, like the eyes. Okay. Okay. So I think that's probably good enough for that. The eyes, and then also just like the hands too, because sometimes these get hard to paint later on. So I can't believe I forgot to turn the stream on again. Okay. I think that's probably good. Well, actually, let me just do a quick little line right down the middle. Okay. So, next step is to so our next step is to paint the background. We're going to put a little bit of color in there and get that whole process started. And so when I say the background for this painting, essentially I'm talking about the the sky, the violin, the sheet music, maybe even this, well, yeah, that's what we'll do first to start with. That's to do that, I think what we're going to start with is putting in a bit of a cool brown back here. We'll use gray for the sheet music, and then we're going to put a cool blue in for the sky there. So let's mix some of that color. Let's start with a cool brown. So to make a cool brown, it's very similar to what we just did here, but I'm going to start with my cool yellow and my cool red, and I'm making a cool orange. Right, put a bit more yellow in there, and now we're going to take some cool blue. Now, the more blue we put into an orange, the darker of a brown we're going to get. So right now, that's a very bright, kind of orangey brown. The more blue we put in here, the darker we're going to get. And if we look at the original, we'll put these side by side. You know, we need to go even darker than that. So let's take even more blue. Now, while that might look very green, we just have like a very, very dark brown. Let's take a bit more red. Maybe a bit more yellow in here too. So you can see that we're very close to a gray. The reason why this didn't go black is because we used our cool red and not our warm red, right? But they are very, very close to being in the same kind of color, like family there. Let's put a bit more blue in here. If I put too much blue and red in there, then it does go purple. That's why I'm adding a little bit more yellow. That keeps it, we go back to a bit of more of a brown. Okay, so so you can see I'm not being too worried about getting that all correct. I think that's good enough. Okay. And then so while I'm here, let's add a bit more yellow to this mixture. make the violin. And you know what? I'm going to put a little bit of white in here as well. Now, that's not the exact color of the violin, but this will block out some of the background color and allow me to paint it a little bit more like the color I want afterwards. Just gotta fix, got my fingerprint, my pinky in here, so let's just take more of that darker brown and bring that back in there. Okay, so it looks pretty sloppy, clumsy, that's okay. Just want to get that in place as quickly as possible, and then we'll move on. So now let's do the background here. So that background is a cool blue and a little bit of gray in there, quite frankly. So let's take our cool blue and a little bit of black and a little bit of white and mix that together. So what that does is it just takes the intensity of that color down. And you know, if I look at it, that still seems like it's still intense, too intense, right? So let's take a bit more black, a bit more white. The more black and white we put in there, the more gray this is going to become and the less intense this color will be. Now, I could keep on going, but honestly, I don't know how much more I want to do. I don't want it to be as maybe blah of a background. And you know what? I'm going to put just a tad of yellow in here. I'm going to make it a little bit more blue. I was kind of, you know, I'm like looking at that thinking, that's a kind of a blah background. I want mine to have a bit more joie de vivre. Alright, so you can see I'm just painting right through that sword, which is why I added the underpainting right there, just to so I don't lose it completely. I'll just zoom back out there. I also just painted that elbow down there, right? So you can see I also didn't bother doing all of the clouds and stuff at this stage. I think I'll do that in the next pass on the background. Because I want to get as much of this painting well established as quickly as humanly possible, so that I can then focus on mostly the face and the body of the main subject of today's painting. Because in the past, sometimes I'll spend hours on the background and then I run out of time and I've got a really beautiful background, but my foreground needs to be more well established. So I'm trying to learn from all my own mistakes, follow my own advice to get this painting done in a reasonable amount of time. So let's move on. Okay, so we've got the first pass on the background established. Let's do the same thing with the figure in the foreground. Oh, I didn't do the book. We'll do the book or the sheet music really quickly, and then we'll paint the figure in the foreground and the little armrest that he seems to be resting on there. Okay. So just to kind of quickly, let's do this sheet music here. And you know what? I'm going to do a bit of a combination. I'm going to use a tiny bit of this brown. Also because it's a little bit of a cooler color. And it's just going to look a little bit like aged paper or something, right? So I'm going to take this. Let's make it just a little bit lighter. Now there is a lot of white in here, and that may cause me to lose my lines. It probably will, so just be careful. If this is something that you feel really worried about losing, you can add a little bit of medium in here, water if you have to try to preserve some of those lines. I'm not too concerned about that because I'm pretty confident I'll be able to find those lines. And of course, you could paint anything in here. You could paint Dr. Seuss over his shoulder if you wanted. But you know, I can see those lines are still kind of a little bit there. It's not maybe as apparent on screen, but they're I think that's going to be good enough. And you know what? I'm going to expand that book. Just cover up some of that brown. You know what? Let's do that on the other side here too. Okay. Now, you know what is... I'm going to move on to the jacket, and I just want to share with you something here so that you can see... I've been a little confused as to how to proceed here because... where is it? Did I not open it? Oh, let me see. I want to show you just some images because this same image was obviously printed in with two different colors. We have one version that was engraved with a red jacket, and then we have the same image engraved with a blue jacket. I don't know the difference. I tried doing a little bit of research in here, but I wasn't able to find out a clear reason as to why you know, the color would be so dramatically different between two versions of the exact same print. I wonder potentially if it has something to do with the French Revolution. So this painting is made in 1787. The French Revolution is, you know, from 1779 to, or 17. Okay, now I'm gotta get my facts straight here. Okay, how come okay. Anyway, let's yeah, 1789, that's what I thought, to 1799 is the French Revolution. So you could see that this painting was created, you know, just a couple of years before the French Revolution begins. And when that begins, everyone sort of has to take sides. Are you with us or are you against us? And each decision is sort of, whatever choice you make, you might be on the right side for right now, and then when the pendulum swings back the other way, which it inevitably did, you find yourself on. So it was very hard for a lot of people to navigate, you know, which side does one stay on. And so I wonder if, let's say they originally painted him with a red jacket before the revolution begins, and then all of a sudden, anyone found wearing a red jacket is slated to have their heads chopped off in the guillotine. So let's print some where he's wearing a blue jacket, or maybe he calls up Mather Brown and is like, yeah, remember that portrait you did of me? Do you think we could just change the color of my jacket so that I don't get killed? So I mean, I don't know. I have no idea what explains that. But I think most of the images I've seen feature him with a red jacket. So that's what I'm going to do for our painting today. I'm going to use a warm red to paint in this background. And I'm just going to use warm red right off the tube here and paint this right in here. Now, the red doesn't probably appear this way on camera because how bright this red appears, but I can still see all of my pencil lines just with this warm red out of the tube, because most of these colors are going to be fairly transparent, and that's usually the case with less expensive paints. I'm also going to paint right over these buttons too, just easier than going around all of them. Most of the time, your less expensive paints are not very opaque. And we're using relatively inexpensive, what they might say, student-grade paint. And in order to make this cover up your background, we would have to use a little bit of white. And which we do quite often, but I think because the more expensive paints are often using actual original pigments, which can or may not be opaque. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Sometimes actual original pigments are very transparent. But when you're using synthetic pigments, most of the time they're quite transparent, as we see here. So I don't have to worry so much about doing my underpainting here to preserve those lines, because they will show through. Keep going back to that because I got a little bit sloppy and made a bit of a boo-boo over there, so just cleaning that up. I think it's interesting also, if you see here, I overlapped some of the red onto the blue background, and what do you know, it almost goes black right there, which might not be necessarily what you want, but you know, if we look at the original, there is kind of this dark black outline around that edge and underneath the armpit, etc., as this arm is in behind him. So, you know, if we do overlap accidentally on top of the blue, it actually is not a bad thing at all, because that area of the painting is also going to be bathed in darkness. But why does that happen? Well, just think, basically, we're making a black right here, but it's mixing optically rather than mixing, having, as a result of the paint being physically mixed together, the pigments on the palette. Instead, we've got this blue, and I put a bit of yellow in there. It's the cold blue with a cold yellow, and then we're painting warm red over top of it. And how did we mix our black? Well, cool blue, cool yellow, and warm red. That's how we painted this. So when we paint this red over top of it, it's basically like we're mixing a black, or our eye perceives that as black. Okay, I think that's probably a good start here. I'm just gonna, any kind of streakiness, might want to clean that up a bit, but we'll have to wait for this to dry a little bit more to take care of any egregious streaks. It's funny, like, I was streaming, or I was recording video for almost 40 minutes before someone mentioned that, like, Paula says, what happened to Michael? So, if after 5 minutes the video hasn't started, please let me know in the comments so that I don't repeat this. You guys are so sweet and gentle and patient, and yet, here I am thinking that the videos, everything is going right, and yet clearly nothing was going right. So I rely on you guys to let me know how things are working, if the sound is off, or problems with the camera. Often I don't know unless you guys let me know. So please feel free to speak up. Okay. So let's move on to the next step here. Let's begin to, well, let's do a bit of the white, and actually I'm going to take a bit of the same gray. Yes, it's the gray that was in the background. It's going to add a little bit of actual black, or the black that I mixed into here, and I'm just going to paint hair and the collar here. And I'm going to do the same with this gray down here, even though it's going to be mostly white. It won't hurt to have a little bit of gray in here. This might potentially save me some time doing some of the shadows in this area, because this will be kind of like a mid-value. So I can lighten and darken this, even though that's not what Mather Brown did here. Okay. Also, let's take a little bit of this white. I'm going to put this into the handle. Oops, I just painted the handle of the fencing sword. And let's paint the glove and the box here that he's, or his armrest, I suppose you could say. So to do that, actually I'm just going to clean my brush. Get some of this white off the brush. Katie says, I want to say something, but I'll wait. Because I was, well, technically I wasn't late, I just forgot to press play. So, okay, so let's take some of our warm yellow, and we'll take a little bit of warm red, and make an orange. And let's just see how that looks for the glove. Maybe let's put just a little bit more red in here. So it's kind of an orange, but we don't want an orange, we want a brown. So I'm going to take a little bit of warm blue, all right, and mix that in there. So by putting that blue into the orange, it turns it into a brown. So let's see what this looks like if we paint this in here. Looks like maybe some of my black paint was still wet down there. Okay. And we also have this very similar color down here in the bottom left. So let's mix that color again, but maybe we'll just make it a little bit more brown. So I'm using a bit more red in there, and a bit of warm blue. Maybe let's put a bit more yellow in there. Now, if I felt this was too dark, I would remix the color rather than trying to add more and more yellow, because I could end up using that entire blob of yellow just to get this to the quote-unquote color I want. It's always easier to darken a color than it is to lighten a color. Now, I'm not sure what I guess I should have put that gray in behind his elbow there, so maybe we'll do that. And also, this area here is vertical, and I'm going to paint this horizontal, just so that literally my brush strokes emphasize the different planes of this shape here. Very subtle, but that's part of the game, is that subtlety. Okay. And then lastly, we can use this same color to paint the face, the skin tone. Now, again, this goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, is how do we want to deal with that? I mean, we don't really know in what exactly he looked like. We have these renditions, these portraits, but they're also potentially hiding his ethnicity, both maybe on his own request or because the people who are making the prints felt, well, if he looks a little bit more white, maybe we can sell these prints. And if we're going to go all this trouble of making a print, we want to sell it. So let's just make him look a little bit less African and a little bit more Caucasian. So who knows? That's my own suspicion of what happened there. So we could use literally this identical color to paint his skin tone, or we could make it even darker. I think I'm going to opt for just a little bit darker. So I'm going to let's mix a bit more of this. I'm going to take some more of my warm yellow and my warm red. Let's take a little bit of my warm blue and bring this in here. And that's pretty good. I'm also just going to add a little bit of white in here. The more white we put in there, the more Caucasian he will appear. But there's also, we want to kind of keep some of the warmth and the lightness kind of emanating from inside, right? Even if he was really, really dark skinned, I think we'd still want to put a little bit of white in there, just to kind of give him a kind of a life force kind of emanate. Because then we can also paint darker over top and lighter over top. But because this is just our first pass on the face, right? We're not intending to have this right here be the final time that we paint this face. We're painting what we call the local color. Okay, how does that look? That's pretty close, right? So there's going to be some darker areas, obviously, and we're going to have some rouge on his cheeks. But there's also going to be some areas that are a little bit lighter. So this just gives us a good solid foundation. It's very similar to what we did down here, but just a little bit darker. Or it's a little bit darker brown, but also just got a little bit of white in it too. So, and that little bit of white that's in there will also help with some of the, like when we, how to mention that, like if you've got white underneath a color, additional colors on top of that will really have more of a punch to them, which is what the Impressionists did by painting directly often on a white canvas without any color. Pascal says, pop quiz, who can say how many different pigments there are in this painting? Pascal says, my Scots friends would be mad. Red coat! Well, as I said, you could paint it as a blue coat, because there were versions of this in blue coat. Okay. So I think that's pretty good. What I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly blow dry everything. I've got a bunch of wet paint in different stages, and I want to be able to go to the background next and finish the background, and then go back to the foreground and finish the foreground. Ideally, if I can do that in 2 passes, that would be great. So I'm just going to mute the microphone for a moment here. Okay, so now we've got the whole painting covered with paint, and now we're going to go back and we're going to refine everything. So we just kind of put these as placeholders. They're generally the right colors where we want them to be, but they're not they're very specific, and there's no details in there yet. So that's what we're going to do next. Let's, in fact, maybe let's just take a moment to compare these at this stage. So the first thing I'm going to do, I want to work on the sky for a few minutes and see if I can get a few clouds in here and a few kind of, yeah, just basically, oh, what's going on down there? Interesting. Okay. But essentially, let's kind of remix part of this color we were using originally, and let's go lighter this time. So we'll take our cool yellow, or cool white, and some white. So, or cool blue and some white. Let's take a little bit of gray, or a little bit of black to make a gray, but let's lighten this up even more. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is, oh, here. I thought for a moment I did take a bunch of these to school the other day, so. How much do I want to put in here? So here's my glazing fluid, my satin glazing fluid. And I'm going to mix this into the paint to give it some transparency. And it also has some slow dry properties in there. So maybe I probably should have washed my brush, to be honest. This is going to be pretty opaque, but this might make me have to just paint this a little bit faster. So I'm going to use this. I'm also going to use just another brush to blend out the work I'm about to do here, just to kind of soften the edges, which we generally want with like cloudy, with clouds, right? So now I to take my other brush. And one might be tempted to try to just do, you know, all of the white stuff first and then come back and do some. But then what happens is it's going to start drying pretty quickly. And that can be really tricky to do this with paint as it's kind of seizing up. So I want to do kind of smaller areas at a time here. Okay, that's not bad for a start. Now I'm going to go the opposite direction. I'm going to take some more black and let's make this darker. And actually, I should follow my own instructions. I'm going to blow dry this because if I try to paint over top of this, I'm going to end up peeling paint off. So I'm going to blow dry my glaze. Okay, so now I'm going to take my darker color here, and I want to try to get as much excess paint off as possible. And so that's pretty subtle. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It just might mean it might take you a little bit longer to do some of this. I'm only kind of loosely following the painting, as kind of always. Feel free to make up your own version of how these clouds behave. And notice I haven't even dipped my paintbrush back into the palette. I'm still using some of the paint that I had there originally when I first dipped my brush in and mixed that paint. You might have, I mean, that's not necessarily the case for everybody, but we don't really want to have a lot of paint here anyway. Glazing is very thin coats of almost transparent paint, so it's not in your interest to kind of big globs of paint here. So let's see. It's not bad. So again, what I want to do is I'm going to blow dry that one more quick time. Okay, so we can do this again using the same darker color. I'm actually just going to make it even darker just to speed this process up even more. And let's just put a few more even darker areas. You know what? Let's go even darker, just a tad bit. Let's just look at a slightly different viewpoint here. Okay, I'm going to blow dry that again. We'll do one more. Okay. So that's pretty good for my darks. I'm going to do one little bit more with the lighter color, with just a lighter, more white in there, just to finish that background off. Then we'll move to the violin and the sheet music on the left side there. I'm also just washing my blending brush because, you know, it's been sitting there with paint on it for a little bit, and it starts to dry up and seize up, and then all it's going to do is just scratch the surface. Katie says the poor guy's wig would also evaporate with that heat. Water evaporates. Oh, yes. Oh, from the hair dryer. I see. You guys are so clever. I see. I see. Okay. So, let's add just a little bit more white in here. Add a little bit more glazing fluid. We'll see if we can just get a few more little pops of light. Here's just another dry brush to use as to do a bit of blending. This is maybe not, I mean, there's these clouds, but they're kind of disorganized. I'm kind of just going as quickly as possible. I think, you know what, if you understand the process here, then that's all that's important, but really haven't established a particular logic for the way these clouds are behaving. It's kind of a little odd, isn't it? Okay, I have to be careful about doing too much more there before using the blow dryer, otherwise I'm going to start scraping some of that paint off. So that's kind of odd, isn't it, right there? Do I want to just move on here? I think I will. I mean, it's possible, you know, as I work on the painting more, I might fall in love with what I've done here, or I might want to change it. I think I'm going to move on, and then we'll see. If I have time at the end, I can always do a little bit more fiddling in that area. So let's just clean these brushes off. After all, I'm trying to get the whole painting done in about 4 hours, which is a race, right? So we can only expect so much. Sorry, what did I miss here? Katie says, stay strong, Pascaline. I love your name, by the way. Aww. Pascal says, the server at the sushi restaurant said I should wash my palette with ginger. It's not working. Move the paint to the left or right, Pascaline, in case you fall asleep. What? What have I missed here? Or my eyelids are closing. Okay, it's 11:30 at night in England. Okay, okay. I'm like, what are we talking about? So let's move on to, let's do this background here. So we're going to use our dark cool green, or dark cool brown again. So to do that, looks like this paint is kind of seized up. So let's take our cool blue, cool red. We get that purple. So we take some cool yellow to neutralize it. And maybe a bit more yellow, a bit more red to get just a bit more of that green, or the brownish quality. So, if we look at this, it is pretty dark back there. So, how is that? It's almost a little bit purple. I guess I must have used a lot of blue in that mixture, but use a smaller brush for some of it now that we're getting into kind of some details. Out of curiosity, can you hear the sound of some this, because I have a security camera here in the basement now, and it's going wild because I'm moving around as I'm painting, and I'm curious if you hear any kind of like the camera moving. I can hear it, but I wonder if it's being picked up by the microphone at all. If you hear it, it sounds like a little motor moving. I hope the answer is no, but so when in doubt, I'll paint over an edge, and then I can bring that edge, so that way I can overlap it with the other color afterwards. Pascal says, no, just your voice and the background music. I don't notice the camera. Okay, good. Why am I holding that brush? Let me see, is that too dark? It's also a little bit more on the reddish side too. That's okay. I don't, you know, I always like a little bit of extra color, so if we want, we can also just do a very easy glaze afterwards that's got a bit more of a yellow quality to it, which will neutralize some of that reddishness. Like we could put a bit of a kind of a yellow greenish glaze on top of there. I wonder about just leaving this. Well, no. Do I want to do that now? Maybe I should do that right now. Just look, how am I doing with time? 2:30. Okay, I got 2 hours. Let's see if I can do this. So I'm gonna blow dry this so I can paint the violin next. Okay, so again, let's mix the color for the violin. Let's take this same color. Yeah, let's take. Well, let's do it right in here, or maybe let's do it right there. That's too dark. I should have just mixed it separately here. So I think I'm going to take this color and let's do this over here, because it would take a lot of paint to lighten that up. So, whoa, too much yellow came out of there. You see how, like, there's just no point in me trying to add more yellow to that mixture there. I'd end up using that whole tube of paint needlessly, so. In fact, that might itself be still... Let's just try doing it again. Pascal says, tricky part will be trying to make the notes make sense so that it can be played. Well, we'll see, Pascal. That's ambitious. I mean, that's what obviously Mather Brown did here, but whether we'll be able to, or even if I have the time to do that, we'll see. You know, it looks like I'm gonna go even lighter. I'm gonna take a bit of white. Okay. So let's take that same color and let's paint the bow in behind here, maybe. Not bad. Now there's still more stuff that I want to do here. This is pretty kind of clumsy at the moment. And I think, again, I might just let this sit here and dry and then come back afterwards, maybe when I get a little bit more done, and paint that as well as the sheet music. Just because I'm just thinking of time, right? Guitar chords will do. How about tabs? Does anybody, I learned how to play piano using music, but I also play guitar, and I long ago forgot how to read music properly. My mother enrolled me in music classes, my sister and I, when we were kids. I hated music classes. I hated it. And I think my mom said, when you're 10 or 14 or whatever the date was, you'll be old enough to make up your own mind, and you can choose to continue doing music classes or not. And the day whatever birthday that was, I was like, okay, done with music. Never playing piano ever again. Which, now that many years later, I look at with a great disappointment in myself. It's like, why? It would be so nice to know how to play piano today. But, somewhere in there, maybe if I took some piano lessons again, it would all come back, but my own stubbornness thwarted me again. So I can read tab music, but not sheet music anymore. And tabs are kind of the simple way to learn how to play guitar. So let's zoom back out here. Yeah, let's keep on going. Not such a fan of those clouds and everything. Kind of went a little overboard there. Got a little excited. You can see where his is very subtle, right? Where I've kind of like gone, woo! Brought it in there. Katie says you could write Cyrillic letters and half the people wouldn't notice. Yeah, I could do all sorts of things. There could be little, depending on how small I make it, there could be little happy faces. There could be Egyptian hieroglyphs in there. Okay, so let's, what should we do now? Let's do the jacket. Or maybe I'm dealing with time too. Okay, yeah. Let's start this jacket. Get that kind of in place. I think that would feel very satisfying. So to do that, let's do some glazes with some dark red. So let's take our red and our black. So we got a much darker color here. And then we'll take glazing fluid and mix this in. So that's a pretty high concentration of paint to glaze, but as I said, our kind of want to move as quickly as possible. And then we want to have another clean, dry brush. Some of these ones I used earlier are still a little bit wet, and while that might be fine if I wanted to do more painting, but for blending, I wanted a bone-dry brush. Otherwise, this is going to wake up that paint, and it'll start kind of smearing rather than blending. And it just kind of creates chaos. Oh, so let's, I think I need to do another intertitle here. Okay, so now we did another little pass on the background. I'm not done because I still want to do a little bit of work on the violin and the sheet music. Not so happy with the sky, but you know, if we have more time at the end, we'll take care of that. What I want to do is work on the foreground. So to start with that, what we're going to do is we're going to paint the jacket. And just before the pause there, what I did is I just took some warm red and some black and my satin glazing fluid, right, to mix this much more crimson. You can see it almost has a little bit of this cool red quality, right, because it's going closer to the neutral core, right? So it's just sort of sucking its the saturation right out of the paint. So let's put these side by side. Where is it? Okay. And let's just start looking for dark shapes. And maybe I'm going to start with a smaller paintbrush, and we'll build up to a bigger one here. So some of these areas are going to be even darker still, but this is just our first little pass of this darker color, right? I know this looks kind of patchy on camera, but I assure you, in quote unquote real life, it looks a little bit nicer. It's just because of the way that the camera captures these reds. Maybe I should zoom back that out a bit. So this whole area is kind of quite dark. Again, I'm not sure how well this is translating on camera, unfortunately, but as always, these reds tend to kind of blow out a little bit, but just darkening this whole scene in here. Let's go to the other side. Another thing that is very interesting about this painting is this shadow that's on his, I guess, his right arm here. That is very weird. Like, I wonder what that is intending to convey. Let's just, I'll just show you that. It's so weird. Like, why... I mean, you tell me, like, why would you think Mather Brown would have this deep shadow on his right arm? I mean, it sort of looks like there's someone, you know, maybe it's the artist himself casting a shadow onto his subject. But that's very, like, meta, you know, like, very postmodern, if that's the idea, that he's kind of trying to include himself, his presence in the artwork. I mean, that's something, you know, an artist today or from the 90s would do. It seems like a very odd strategy for an artist in the 1700s to do on a painting. So I wonder what that meaning would be. And throughout, like, art history, artists have, there's all sorts of sort of symbols and approaches artists do to customize paintings and add hidden kind of meanings in their artwork. And so it wouldn't surprise me if there was, like, a, you know, some kind of a reason that goes back to, like, Greek mythology, or, like, you know, certain kinds of paintings by certain famous artists. Like, so for instance, kind of famous, the example he always gets trotted out is, you know, an empty shoe in a painting is intended to represent either like, you know, that somebody was impotent, basically, that there was a problem with the marriage and they were unable to conceive. So you might have a portrait of like a family, but there might be a couple of empty shoes open facing the audience, meaning that there's sort of this hollow emptiness. So artists have always kind of played with those little kinds of things in order to kind of add hidden meanings to the artwork, like subtext, as one might say, right? Okay, interesting. Pascaline says maybe a happy accident, or it's possible literally an accident. One thing I didn't mention about the story of Joseph Boulogne is that he was I think it was, let's go to the actual 17. What year is it? 1797, I think. There's a kind of a violent attack. Where is... Or 1779, him and a friend are walking through Paris, and he's attacked by 6 white men, who turns out later on happen to be police officers. So, which is probably a racially motivated attack. Who knows exactly what happened, 300 years ago, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was something like you have this black celebrity walking around Paris at night, at around midnight, which probably was not something that a slave or an enslaved person would be allowed to do. And there were slaves in France as well, maybe not as many as there were in English and Dutch and Spanish colonies, but and in their homeland, but there still were. And so the idea that, and obviously there was still lots of prejudice against people of color back then. So it might have been sort of like, hey, what are you doing walking around? Hey, what are you talking about? I'm allowed to do this. I'm kind of, I just came from the king's palace. I'm allowed to walk around. I'm a famous composer. And they're like, yeah, right. Look at you. Look at your skin color. You're not allowed to be, and then so on and so forth. That's just my reading into that situation. But anyway, so I just sort of, Pascaline just mentioning about maybe this shadow on his arm was a happy accident. When I first read that, I was like, oh, it's an accident. Maybe it was part of that assault. Maybe that's what the Mather Brown's trying to allude to in this painting. Although, no, wait a second. That happened... What? That happened... No, so yeah, this happened 8 years before this painting was done. So it's possible that he had been injured, and this is sort of, in the elbow area, and Mather Brown is trying to show us, like, kind of a little hint as to kind of how Joseph Boulogne suffered. I don't know. I always think those things are kind of fascinating to kind of just ruminate over, especially as we're making these paintings. It's like, what is the story behind here? So I'm going to take this red. Let's put a bit more black in here. What is the question? Pascaline says, Michael, can acrylic be used as a watercolor style? Watercolor is so delicate and difficult to master. I just like the fun of acrylic. You can. You can paint... I mean, basically, when you're doing glazes, in a way, is like painting like watercolor, because you're painting relatively thin. I mean, yeah, you can do most of the things in watercolor you can do in acrylic. I find a watercolor just so difficult as a medium to master. And as I said many times, the irony is not lost on me that most people learn to paint with watercolor, and because it's so easy to clean up relatively to everything else, and this, you just need a little bit of water and you're off and running. But there's a reason I'm doing an acrylic painting class and not a watercolor class, because that is not my strongest suit for sure. Oops. Okay. Let's... I keep bringing that down. Okay, let's... I want that. Okay. I'm going to blow dry that. I'm going to take... Let's do some glazing with black. I'll take my black. So now I'm painting kind of along these darker edges of his jacket. And then let's go into the shadows beneath it all, along his belly. So we can just keep building more and more layers like this infinitely, but I'll try to kind of wrap this up. I mean, this is the kind of thing that Mather Brown would have probably spent weeks doing, right? Just slowly doing this, building up these wrinkles, right, to kind of get the exact right look that he wanted. Let's take this brown, mix black into that, and do this area here. A little sloppy, but that's okay. I'm just gonna take this bit of much darker brown, paint this underneath his arm. Touch that up as well shortly. Yeah, this is coming along. We're doing well. Okay, we're where I kind of want to be at this time. Just gonna blow dry that and do a little bit. darken this again. I'm also going to use this to do the hands. Might as well. I've got this kind of darker brown here. So you can see all these lines, those are originally, that's part of our underpainting here, right? And it's still, and it served its purpose so that we could find where the different, the fingers go. And it's still transparent enough that we didn't lose our place. And potentially it's good enough that we could just leave it, but I'm just going to go back in and just darken things just a little bit here. Blow dry that. Might have over darkened those areas, but that's okay. I think that'll be fine. You know, maybe before I just completely move on from the jacket, and I probably will come back here and do a bit more, but I think what I want to do is just paint in some buttons real quick. So I'm going to use my white and warm yellow. I'm putting maybe a little bit more white than I want to use so that it will cover up the red, and then I can always put just the yellow as it is in its place. Now I have lost some of the details here, so it is a little bit trickier, but we can just use our brains to just sort of try to figure out where those buttons should go, right? We just sort of comparing them back and forth. I don't think it's going to be... Oh, I do see a little bit of my original lines showing through here, so... Now I'm going to glaze back over top of these later on and continue darkening them. So I don't have to worry about mixing a darker color here for these buttons. I just have to paint them in, and then we'll paint over top of them later on. Conceivably, I could have done this earlier on in the painting. Probably that would have been smart, but you know, my brain is only so big. And you know what? Actually, while I've got this color here, a little bit of highlight, I'm going to just put a little bit of glazing fluid on it. And let's just put a little bit of highlight on those gloves. Okay. Let's back out here. Katie says, that looks amazing. Thanks, Katie. Long discussion there. Pascaline and Nikki are having about watercolor and emulating watercolor with acrylic paint. I think Nikki's giving some good suggestions there. Honestly, I mean, I would. That's something I don't really know too much about. That would be pretty. It's it's yeah. I mean, with any of these materials, you can replicate various different mediums with them. It just is a little bit trickier. I mean, obviously, it's desirable to use the original material instead whenever possible. But like you said, maybe there's parts of that original material that you don't like so much, so you want to see if you can adapt a different medium and get similar effects. If that's something people are really interested in, I could take a look at that and see how I could reverse engineer something backwards and see if we can make it work. I'm sure it's possible. I just don't know too much about it. Okay. Maybe let's do the face next here. And then we'll do the collar and hair, or I don't know what you would call this, the neck scarf here. So let's just look at the face. I'm just going to quickly blow dry everything just so I don't smudge any paint for this next step. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to mix another brown skin tone. So let's do that again. Let's take our warm yellow, our warm red, and so we have maybe 60% warm yellow to 30%, no, 20% warm red. In fact, I maybe made it a little bit darker than it needs to be. And then like 5% warm blue. That gives me a nice darker brown. So what I'm going to do first here is go into some of the darker areas of the face, and with this darker color, and then we're going to lighten it up, and we're going to go to some of the lighter highlights. Some people will go in the opposite direction, do the highlights and then go to the shadows. I do find it can be easier to do this in the way that we're doing it, the darker areas first, so that you don't lose those details. And I think just the way most people's brains work, it is easier just to think of doing it darker to lighter, because I think in some ways doing it lighter to darker can seem almost seems maybe backwards for some people, like you kind of have to have a clearer vision of how the whole thing works in that approach. Anyway, let's take our brown here, and remember the previous one we had some white mixed into the color to get some of the that kind of a little bit brighter glow emanating from within. Now we're darkening around this face. Okay. So places where it's going to be darker are kind of where the hair meets the face. going to go darker here with the ear as well, and also make the ear a little bit more red. Obviously in the neck area here. Just going to paint right over those eyebrows and in the interior of the eye socket here. And since the light is coming from the left-hand side of the canvas, most of the shadows on the face are on the right-hand side of his body, or technically his left side, but for us, it's the right side of the painting. So this can take some time to build up these layers, and so that's why I always think of glazing as just sort of the best friend of a timid painter, because you can really take your time, build everything up nice and slow. You don't have to feel like you're really committing to the painting at any point, because you're just slowly building up those different layers of value, right? Value in terms of art is the how we measure the contrast between light and dark, and how much something is. But okay, so it doesn't look like I've done much, maybe. But I'm building this painting. We'll do that again. I'm going to blow dry this so I don't smudge anything. Let's go at this one more time with this sort of just slightly darker color, and then we're going to go much darker. Okay, looking good. Okay, let's blow dry that. Now let's take some of our black and bring this into here. So we're going to make a much darker glaze. Again, you know, like the way Michelangelo too, but Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa, there's like, you know, maybe 100 glazes on the face, right? And by doing that, he can very subtly build up something like the famous smile, where we don't see any brushstrokes. It's just so super subtle. So the longer you spend on this, the more accurate you get, the more you're going to notice every little nook and cranny on the face, and you can just build this up at your own like tiny little pace. Me though, I want to get this done ASAP, so I'm kind of just leaping right towards a much darker color. Or a much darker glaze. So now I'm taking this dark glaze, going right around the chin here. And just softening that ever so slightly. Underneath this lip. You can see there's also the reflected light from his jacket back on this side of his face. I don't know if I have the time to kind of do that, so I might just kind of quickly, well, we'll see. We're going to put some white in those eyes here shortly. I don't want to forget about his little mole here. Where is that? That's right about there. Okay, I think I'm going to blow dry this, and then I'm going to put some highlights and in there next. So, let's just clean these brushes. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to mix a bit of a gray here for the eyes. Let's just take, do I have any brown? Let's take a tiny bit of brown. And a tiny little bit of black. Because the white of your eyes, there might be a bit of white of your eyes, but mostly it's a little bit lighter. Or a little bit not lighter, less intense. So it's got, you know, some grays in there or reds in there. So I'm painting a little bit over top of a few. I'm going to put some dark black lines that will go over top of some of this white. So I'm painting a little bit more white than will actually be there. So for a moment, it's going to look like he's kind of looking up into the sky. And even that seems almost a little bit too white, right? But we can always darken it down later. Okay, while I'm here, I'm going to take a little bit of warm red. Get a little bit of glazing fluid on my warm red. And so it kind of looks pink right now, but as it dries, it's going to go back to red. Because it's that glazing fluid on there. Let's take a bit of this. Give him a little bit of rouge in his face here. And up in his forehead. Okay, now let's go to our brown again. And this time let's take this brown and make it much lighter. So take more yellow. Take a little bit of white, not too much. And then my glazing fluid mixed into that. And actually, before I do anything, I'm just going to blow dry what I've got here. Come on. There we go. So places where we see the highlights are going to be on the nose. It looks like this isn't quite bright enough, but maybe this is good for our first little pass. The top of these, above his eyebrows there. And forehead. Tops of the cheeks. Chin. Even a little bit underneath the eyebrows too. Okay, let's blow dry that. Okay, let's take more white. Maybe even a bit more yellow. Well, maybe I shouldn't put too much more yellow in there. It's going to look funny. But just going to keep on lightening and lightening and lightening. We're getting there. Getting there. Feeling better and better every brush stroke. I mean, how much more of this do I want to do? I guess is the next question before I feel like I can move on. I think what I'll do, let's do just a little, no, okay. Let's blow dry this. And I'm going to go one last little bit. I'm just taking the same paint. I'm not lightening it up anymore. Okay. I'm going to put a bit of more red on his lips here. And I'm going to take just a little bit of white. You know, I should have just waited for that to dry and then put the white on afterwards. So I'm just going to paint that back out. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to just do some outlining with black. And then I'm going to move on from the face for right now. There's maybe a few little more highlights and shadows I could put in here to get closer to his likeness. But there's still lots of other things I got to do in this painting, so we will see. Let's go to our black. Not much left. That's okay. We don't need much of it. We probably don't want to be too heavy-handed with black outlines anyway. So I want that black circle of his iris to get as close to the bottom eyelid as possible to make it look like he's looking straight forward. Go right into those nostrils there. Okay, and then as I get coming up onto the, I guess, as we would say, the right side of his face here, I'm going to put this shadow here. Ideally, I would leave a little bit of a gap there for reflected light, but as you can see that Mather Brown is so masterfully done, but I'm just going to opt out of that just for the sake of time. Okay. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good about the face. It's not perfect, but I still got to do the hair and his the what would you call it, scarf collar. And I got about half an hour left to do it. So let's in fact, yeah, we'll keep on going. I was gonna maybe do another title card, but let's look at this hair now. So the hair, we're gonna just take our black and let's take some white and make a gray. Again, we put a little bit of glazing fluid just so I can smudge and blend things if I want to do so. It does make it a little bit more transparent, of course, but that's pretty subtle, so let's make it a bit darker. So slowly starting to expand past my edges here. I'm going to just go down to the collar here while I'm right here. Maybe while I'm right here, I'm just going to make this even darker. And I'm going to blow dry it in a second, but just will help give this... So is all my black gone? Okay. Let's just come back up to the hair and continue. Katie says, this was wonderful. Thank you, Michelangelo. Till next time. I appreciate that, Katie. Shiva says, hello, everybody. Awesome. Okay, let's blow dry this, and then we're going to add our white highlights in, and then I might be done with the face. We'll see. Okay, just gotta wait for the computer to finish what it needed to do, and then now I'm going to take a little bit of white, and we'll glaze with some white into the hair and into the scarf. So glazing isn't just a darkening technique. We can also use it to lighten. Remember, white is very powerful, so if we, you just want to be kind of careful how much white you use, because it will cover everything completely. Having a little bit of glazing fluid in here weakens the white, though, and so it loses some of its strength and allows us to kind of go a little bit slower at our own pace without quite so much fear of obliterating things. That's going to dry and lose some of its the strength of the tinting here, so we might want to come back and do a little bit more there later, but let's just move on. So now I'm actually just going to take some pure white rather than glazing with white. Otherwise it's going to take me for, 5 layers of this to cover up some things. So again, I'm going to take my pure white . Okay, let's, what should we work on next? Let's just take a little zoom out and see how things are going. Again, think the jacket's actually looking better. It looks better in person than it might look on camera, just because of how those reds behave. So now we want to do the fencing sword, perhaps. So, what color is that fencing sword now that I look at it? Kind of a brownish yellow. I'm just going to start with white. And it's actually interesting. I actually ended up looking this, like, fencing swords up on, because I thought originally that there was something awkward about this, about the sword. Like, why doesn't the handle continue straight through here? It looks like it's bent. And so, in fact, actually fencing swords are bent, or the handle is not straight aligned. Like, I don't have any swords here to demonstrate, but let me see. Here's a table leg from a table or a chair leg from a chair. So if the handle was in fact straight like this, right, then in order to fence, you'd have to really kind of awkwardly hold your hand up straight like this. Whereas having it kind of bent a little bit like this allows you to kind of hold it more like almost like a gun, so that you don't have to kind of have your, and then you can hold it kind of straight up like that and fence, as opposed to like trying to kind of, right? Anyway, for anybody who's interested, that was something I kind of discovered as I was putting together the episode. I'm like, oh, so Mather Brown didn't make some really sloppy beginner's mistake by not having this, like, as, you know, aligned properly, but he was actually painting exactly how the sword should look. Go figure. I mean, yeah, sometimes you just think maybe somebody made a little mistake here, but it turned out nope, that's the way it should be. So, let's start with a gray. Already this looks kind of wider than the original. Okay. Now the sword, let's get a fairly small point here. And if you're not happy with that, get a little bit of water on there, rub it away as quickly as possible. So I like to just do that first, for a very thin, small line first, and then build around it. That helps me get my bearings here. Now I could use a Posca pen for something like this to help get a continuous straight line. I could use tape if I wanted to try to get a line that way. So, am I happy with that? I mean, just in not the how it's painted, but just is it straight? I think that's straight enough. I think that's pretty good. Now I'm just gonna do a little bit of detailing in the shadows. I might have to make another little small batch of black here. So I need a few more, I need a little bit more. I was going to see if I cheap out and just use my cool red, but let's do it properly, Michael. Some cool blue, warm red, and we get a nice dark purple, and we put some cool yellow in there. That looks a little bit on the greenish side, meaning we just need a little bit more blue, or red, I mean. Shiva says, I'm late. I was in a birthday party. I just came back home. Here in my place, it is 3:35 in the morning. Shiva, go to bed. It says, showing the metallic texture is the most difficult part, I think. Definitely, that can be one of the more difficult things. Speaking of which, I'm going to blow dry this so that it'll just make my life a little bit easier to do those darker areas. Okay, let's get some black on the brush. Technically, he's using kind of a dark brown, but I'm not going to let that stop me. Let's go to an even smaller brush here. My smallest brush. I'm going to add just a little bit of glazing fluid to my black because it's kind of drying up a little bit, and that's just going to make it a little bit more fluid and easier to paint. It does make it a bit more transparent, so just have to keep that in mind, that depending on what you're doing, if you add a lot of glazing fluid to black, then you might have to go over top of those lines a second time to get it as dark as maybe you were hoping it would be. Okay. Okay. Getting there. How much time? Okay, I got about 10 minutes. Okay, how do I want to spend these 10 minutes here? So now I'm just darkening more and more into some of these folds. There's the violin back there. I'm going to try to get to that here as quickly as I can. This is kind of getting a little bit sloppy as I'm just racing to get this in, and kind of obliterates a little bit of the careful work I had done earlier, but I don't really have much of a choice. Ah! How did I get some white in there? Oops, okay, I gotta wash that brush. Once you get white on there, you just can't get enough black on there to... You have to just get black on there, new black. Let's blow dry this. How are we doing? Okay, woo, getting close. I'm just going to mix more black here. Let's take some of our cool red. Pretty close to black, not perfect, but we're also going to be painting in the background here, the violin, so it's going to be a little bit gray anyway. So having a little bit of a not quite as dark a black as we had before is okay. Also, I'm going to just quickly glaze a little bit. Just darken that whole arm. Okay. How can I do let's blow dry this before I do move on here. Okay. So let's, we want a dark, warm, or, well, I guess cool brown, don't we? Let's take our cool yellow, a little bit of cool blue, mostly cool red. Let's blend that together quickly as we can. Let's do a version of this color. It's got more blue in it. Few different browns. I'm wondering how do I want to proceed here as quickly as I can. Oops, not that. I want this. In fact, even before we do that, okay, so we just want to do a few finishing touches. Got a little bit of stuff in the background to do, and then I got to run to get my daughter from the nanny. So we're going to just try to get that violin done as quickly and as maybe clumsily as we can. So... So, what's the fastest way to do this? What if I take a smallish brush? I'm gonna lighten that up a bit more. I was going to do a brown... You know what? I'm going to just paint with that. Okay. Sorry, changing my mind back and forth here to think about the fastest way to do all of this. Let's... so the painting on the left, you know, some of this is cropped out. So we want... Okay. Guess that should have bent. Ah. Hmm. Let's take more white. Not so happy with that, so let's see if I can wipe a bit of that away. Maybe a little bit of that, that's okay, actually. Bit of a darker brown. Oops. Okay, I got, how much time do I really got to go here? It's going to take my white, a little bit of black, There is a little bit of white on that collar, isn't there? Okay, I think, despite me not being completely done, I'm going to have to wrap up here. Okay, painting is not perfect, but I'm out of times for today, so let's do a quick side-by-side comparison and see how my painting does compared to the master's painting. So maybe before we do that really quickly, just as a quick reminder, if you enjoyed this video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when upcoming episodes are taking place. Take a photograph of the artwork that you made while you were watching today. Upload it, or join the Facebook group and upload it to the Facebook group so that we can celebrate your work. There's an awesome community of super supportive artists just like yourself out there that you want to be a part of. Doesn't cost you anything. And once a month I go through that and I select all the artworks that people have posted there and give everybody free feedback. It's one of the most popular things we do. Most of the views in the channel come through that. So I strongly consider you do that. If you want to leave a donation, you found this is worth 50 cents pocket change from your couch, leave a donation through the PayPal. As little as 25 cents people have done. You can do the same sort of thing through the YouTube Super Chat, or contact me through the Facebook group or my website, and you can do an e-transfer, Interact transfer with my email. That's on my website. I don't put it here publicly because otherwise I just get spammed all day long. And that helps keep everything going here. Your donations over the years have been what has gotten me through the pandemic, and why I only intended to do 40 episodes, and I'm on episode 375 today. Right? 3 years later. Okay, so let's take a look at these paintings side by side and see how we feel. It's a bummer that I ran out of time for the numbers back there, or not the numbers, the musical notes, because the subject of today's painting was a famous composer, so that would have made a lot of sense, but we just ran out of time. Not too hard to do some of that, but it just would be a little bit time consuming with a tiny little brush. As opposed to everything else, let's just take a moment to zoom on in and see how things look, different areas of this painting. So here we are in the top left. I remember when I mixed that brown, I noted that it was a little bit more on the reddish side, whereas the brown on the left is more greenish brown. And I could just glaze that and fix it, and no problem. But it's one of those things where it's like, really? Does it make that much of a difference? Sometimes that kind of yellowing also is the result of the varnish that happens over top. Not so happy with the shape of the violin there. The neck should be kind of bent a little bit, and I didn't do that, but you know, I did that whole thing in, what, 10 minutes, so, you know, there's only so much I can do in a short period of time. Let's look at the clouds next. A little speck. So the clouds are a little bit more teal than what I've got here. In fact, actually, even a little bit of warm blue is probably back there. And there's a lot more nuance. Mine kind of look a little bit cartoony as I was doing it as quickly as possible. Obviously, that would be something we would, you know, he would have spent, you know, weeks, you know, really building, well, not maybe weeks, maybe 2 or 3 days dedicated to that background. So not my finest hour, but I also wasn't really observing it too closely. Let's look down here in the bottom. Let's go up here. You know, the other thing too is I painted those buttons and then I glazed over top of them so they lose some of the shine, which is what we want to make it look a little bit darker, and they're part of the shadow. All of this, you know, I'm not so happy. It looks a little bit sloppy. If I had another hour, I probably would have knocked it out of the park, but not everybody's got extra time like that. Let's look at this, the hand. Come on. So let's bring that back down. Pretty good. Don't quite have all the little bends in the glove there exactly where they should be, but I think we got kind of the highlights on the top of the knuckles. I'm happy enough with that. This is slightly different color, again a little bit more warm green or warm red and less greenish brown. Let's keep on going across here. Yeah, I mean, that looks, on camera this looks a little bit sloppy, but in real life this is actually appears much darker than it actually is, so it doesn't look quite so, I mean, you see some of these streaks coming through, and that's just when I was originally painting the glaze and got a little bit, I let it sit there before I kind of blended it in, so that you get a little ridge going on. As I said, we don't have the sheet music in place. I could do that. I could do it with a Posca pen, but I'd want to use like a gray Posca pen so that if I use black, it would really be the only pure black in the painting, and it would really leap forward too much. So you have to just be careful about what you're going to use for that part. These eyes. You know what I think I should do is just put a little bit of white right in the middle of these, or not in the middle necessarily, but even that last one was a bit big. Maybe not. Yeah, I mean, I think that's good enough. I mean, there's a little bit of kind of the stubble almost, right? Like the 5 o'clock shadow on his top lip, which is a little bit of that cool blue. And we could have put a bit more of that elsewhere in the painting, but I think we're pretty good. Not exactly the same likeness, but I think we're pretty close to the colors themselves. And if we wanted to get that likeness even closer, we would just have to spend a little bit longer on there to get it. So let's just back it out one last time and just take a look. So not bad for, what, 4 hours of painting. Feel good enough that I can walk away from that. Oh, that side of the hair should be darker. But you know what? I think we are done for the day. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you next week, and I can't wait to make another painting with you. Next week, we're going to celebrate the... I'm trying to think of the exact number, but it's the anniversary of the Beatles' first appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. So we're going to do a Beatles-themed painting next Thursday. Can't wait to do that with you guys. Have yourselves a wonderful evening. We will see you again. Enjoy your night or your morning. Some of you got to get to sleep. It's too late. Go to bed. Okay. Good night, everybody. We'll talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.